outfits?" "It can be done. I figured it out, down to a packet of assorted size safety pins. We'll call it our emergency outfit. 30 pieces. And while we're about it, every outfit over $5 ought to be packed in a pink or pale blue pasteboard box. The outfits trimmed in pink, pink boxes. The outfits trimmed in blue, blue boxes. In 8 cases out of 10 their letters will tell us whether it is a pink or blue baby. And when they get our package and take out that pink or blue box, they'll be as pleased as if we'd made them a present. It's the personal note."
"Personal slop," growled Slosson. "It isn't business. It's sentimental slush."
"Sentimental, yes," agreed Fanny pleasantly. "But then, we're running the only sentimental department in this business. And we ought to be doing it at the rate of $1.25 million a year. If you think these last suggestions sentimental, I'm afraid the next one—"
"Let's have it, Miss Brandeis," Fenger encouraged her quietly.
"It's—" She flashed a mischievous smile at Slosson. "It's a mother's guide and helper and adviser. A woman who'll answer questions, give advice. Someone they'll write to, with a picture in their minds of a large, comfortable, motherly looking person in gray. You know we get hundreds of letters asking whether they ought to order flannel bands or the double knitted kind. That sort of thing. And who's been answering them? Some 16-year-old girl in the mailing department who doesn't know a flannel band from a booty when she sees it. We could call our woman something pleasant and everydayish, like Emily Brand. Easy to remember. And until we can find her, I'll answer those letters myself. They're important to us, as well as to the woman who writes them. And now, there's the matter of obstetrical outfits. 3 grades, packed ready for shipment. Practical, simple, and complete. Our drug section has the separate articles, but we ought to—"
"Oh, Lord!" groaned Slosson, and slumped disgustedly in his seat.
But Fenger got up, came over to Fanny, and put a hand on her shoulder for a moment. He looked down at her. "I knew you'd do it." He smiled queerly. "Tell me, where did you learn all this?" "I don't know," faltered Fanny happily. "Brandeis' Bazaar, perhaps. It's just another case of plush photograph album."
"Plush?"
Fanny told him that story. Even the discomfited Slosson grinned at it. But after 10 minutes more of general discussion, Slosson left. Fenger, without putting it in words, had conveyed that to him. Fanny stayed. They did things that way at Haynes Cooper. No waste, no delay. That she had accomplished in 2 months that which ordinarily takes years was not surprising. They did things that way, too, at Haynes Cooper. Take the case of Nathan Haynes himself. And Michael Fenger, too, who, not so many years before, had been a machine boy in a Racine woolen mill. For my part, I confess that Fanny Brandeis begins to lose interest for me. Big business seems to dwarf the finer things in her. That red-cheeked, shabby little schoolgirl, absorbed in Zola and peanut brittle in the Winnebago library, was infinitely more appealing than this glib, capable young woman. The spitting wildcat of the street fight, so long ago, was gentler by far than this cool person who was so deliberately taking his job away from Slosson. You too feel that way about her? That is as it should be. It is the penalty they pay who, given genius, sympathy, and understanding as their birthright, trade them for the tawdry trinkets money brings. Perhaps the last 5 minutes of that conference between Fanny and Michael Fenger reveals a new side, and presents something of interest. It was a harrowing and unexpected 5 minutes. You may remember how Michael Fenger had a way of looking at one, silently. It was an intent and concentrated gaze that had the effect of an actual physical hold. Most people squirmed under it. Fanny, feeling it on her now, frowned and rose to leave. "Shall you want to talk these things over again? Of course I've only outlined them roughly. You gave me so little time." Fenger, at his desk, did not answer, or turn away his gaze. A little blaze of wrath flamed into Fanny's face. "General manager or not," she said, very low-voiced, "I wish you wouldn't sit there and glower at me like that. It's rude and it's disconcerting." Which was putting it forthrightly. "I beg your pardon." Fenger came swiftly around the desk and over to her. "I was thinking very hard. Miss Brandeis, will you dine with me somewhere tonight?" "Then tomorrow night?" "But I want to talk to you." "Here I am. Talk." It was then that Fanny Brandeis saved an ugly situation. For she laughed, a big, wholesome, outdoors sort of laugh. She was honestly amused. "My dear Mr. Fenger, you've been reading the murky magazines. Very bad for you." Fenger was unsmiling. "Why won't you dine with me?" "Because it would be unconventional and foolish. I respect the conventions. They're so sensible. And because it would be unfair to you, and to Mrs. Fenger, and to me." "Rot! It's you who have the murky magazine viewpoint, as you call it, when you imply—" "Now look here, Mr. Fenger," Fanny interrupted quietly. Let's be square with each other, even if we're not being square with ourselves. You're the real power in this plant because you've got the brains. You can make any person in this organization or break them. That sounds melodramatic, but it's true. I've got a definite life plan, and it's as complete and detailed as an engineering blueprint. I don't intend to let you spoil it. I've made a real start here. If you want to, I've no doubt you can end it. But before you do, I want to warn you that I'll make a pretty stiff fight for it. I'm no silent sufferer. I'll say things, and people usually believe me when I talk." Still the silent, concentrated gaze. With a little impatient exclamation, Fanny walked toward the door. Fenger, startlingly light and agile for his great height, followed. "I'm sorry, Miss Brandeis, terribly sorry. You see, you interest me very much. Very much." "Thanks," dryly. "Don't go just yet. Please. I'm not a villain, really. That is, not a deliberate villain. But when I find something very fine, very intricate, very fascinating and complex, like these etchings, for example, I am intrigued. I want it near me. I want to study it." Fanny said nothing, but she thought, "This is a dangerously clever man. Too clever for you. You know so little about them." Fenger waited. Most women would have found refuge in words. The wrong words. It is only the strong who can be silent when in doubt. "Perhaps you will dine with Mrs. Fenger and me at our home some evening? Mrs. Fenger will speak to you about it." "I'm afraid I'm usually too tired for further effort at the end of the day. I'm sorry." "Some Sunday night, perhaps, then. Tea." "Thank you." And so out, past the spare secretary, the anxious browed stenographer, the academic office boy, to the hallway, the elevator, and finally the refuge of her own orderly desk. Slosson was at lunch in one of the huge restaurants provided for employees in the building across the street. She sat there very still for some minutes, for more minutes than she knew. Her hands were clasped tightly on the desk, and her eyes stared ahead in a puzzled, resentful, bewildered way. Something inside her was saying over and over again, "You lied to him on that very first day. That placed you. That stamped you. Now he thinks you're rotten all the way through. You lied on the very first day." Ella Monahan poked her head in at the door. The gloves were on that floor at the far end. The two women rarely saw each other, except at lunchtime. "Missed you at lunch," said Ella Monahan. She was a pink-cheeked, bright-eyed woman of 41 or 42, prematurely gray and therefore excessively young in her manner, as women often are who have grown gray before their time. Fanny stood up, hurriedly. "I was just about to go." "Try the grape pie, dear. It's delicious." And strolled off down the aisle that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. Fanny stood for a moment looking after her, as though meaning to call her back. But she must have changed her mind because she said, "Oh, nonsense," aloud, and went across to lunch, and ordered grape pie, and enjoyed it. End of chapter 9.